Greetings, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dr. Lorre, and today I'm here to share with you some strategies from my book, Nursing Your Healer's Heart, a recovery guide for nurse traumatization and burnout. Today, we're going to be talking about just a few concepts. We'll get acquainted, then we'll talk about individual and nurse-specific trauma, how to navigate your nervous system and shore up the foundation of your self-nurturing practices using the microdoses matters practice. So let's get acquainted. And first I'll start by introducing myself. I'm what they call a wildcat for life from the University of Arizona, where I completed both my master's and my doctoral studies. After which I completed 2 postdoc fellowships in integrative nursing, both for faculty and as an integrative nurse coach. For about a decade, I worked at the University of Arizona's College for Social and Behavioral Sciences, and then transitioned over to the College of Nursing, where I have just the immense privilege to teach and be a contributor to the development of the first Bachelor's of Science in Nursing with an integrative health focus. I also have specialty expertise in trauma, and I work a lot with transition to practice nurses as well as nurses who are experiencing professional traumatization and burnout. I've also been a healing arts practitioner for over 30 years. It was during this time that I got the call to my healer's heart, which you can see by the little arrow going through the heart there. When Dr. Pamela Cipriano, who is the president of the International Council for Nurses, said, as a profession, we are asking for help. Our nurses don't feel valued, they don't feel supported, and we need to grow our workforce supply and retain that supply. And while she didn't say it, what I heard was, Lorre, please do your part to address nurse traumatization. that's the bow that went into my healer's heart. And so that's exactly what I'm doing in my work. And in my book, I got busy. I got very busy, actually, for a number of years. Weekends, evenings, every holiday, every vacation. This is what I've been doing. So it's not enough just to grow and retain our international nurse workforce, but we also must end the avoidable nurse trauma to ensure that we have a healthy and thriving workforce. We have to self-empower and facilitate that trauma healing at the individual and collective levels. And so that's really the core of what my work is centered on. And the American Association of Colleges of Nursing echoes that as nurses, we need to take a trauma-informed approach and assume that everyone has experienced some type of trauma in their lives, including nurses. All right, so the goal is that we don't need to, I don't need to know, you don't need to know everybody's trauma history. And the goal isn't necessarily to uncover the trauma. It is to facilitate the healing so that we can be regulated in our nervous systems and thriving in practice. So that's a little bit about me. Let me just check in and have you do some reflection about where you are in all of this. To what degree are you experiencing stress, burnout, or trauma? And you can just reflect on the answers there. Usual amount, maybe a little more, maybe a lot more, maybe, oh my God, too much. So wherever you are welcome and very well supported here with me and in our community. Oops, went the wrong way there. Let me try again. Let's do a quick check-in and see how familiar are you with Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe it sounds familiar. Maybe you're very familiar. Or maybe you, like me, say it's your life. It's certainly been my life for the past 5 years. And I'm grateful for the journey and all the healing I've been able to facilitate. Last question, and then we'll get started on the content, is how comfortable are you navigating your nervous system as a self-caring foundation? And some of you might be, I don't know, maybe a little, well, I'm open, but I'm surely not comfortable. Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable, or I'm already on it. Again, wherever you find yourself in this spectrum, you're in good hands here. All right, so just to let everyone know that we are going to be talking about some sensitive topics concerning individual and nurse traumatization. And if anytime you feel uncomfortable, you start to feel some sensations or perceptions that are a little bit overwhelming, you can pause this video and do some grounding and centering or self-care practice. Whatever resonates for you would be the right one, and then you can come back at any time. So please know you can pause and really attend to your nervous system and what you're experiencing at any time, and that would be really safe and appropriate for the work that we're doing here today. So let's just take a quick review on some of the foundations of trauma for a quick refresher. I know I'm working with nurses all over the globe, and everyone has a different educational background, practice background. So we'll just do a quick refresher to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And I'm going to really see if I can find a better way to advance my slides. So thank you for bearing with me. So let's just define trauma as Gabor Mate does, which is trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. We look at some of our experts, such as Dr. Vanderkolk, who brings forth the information that unhealed or unintegrated trauma is actually embodied. We learned that trauma is not just an event that took place sometimes in the past or even in the present. It's the imprint that is left by that experience in body, mind, and spirit. And I call that your repository. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So every trauma that you have experienced in your lifetime, whether it's personally or professionally, that which didn't get integrated at the time is embodied, and that's really where the healing takes place. But none of us heal in a vacuum alone. My dear mentor, Dr. Bonnie Badenoch, for whom I am eternally grateful for her contributions into my personal and professional life, she reminds us of the importance of the transpersonal nature of trauma healing, as who we perceive as we need being with us before, during, and after event is central to our ability to integrate the trauma throughout our embodied and relational brains. So not only is it a biological process, but it's a relational and social process. None of us heal in a vacuum completely by ourselves. And I'm also just very grateful for the work of Dr. Bruce Perry, facilitated, interviewed by Oprah Winfrey, who's shifting the narrative, the paradigm, and the narrative around trauma healing, moving from what's wrong with me or what's wrong with you to what happened to me, what happened to you, so we can meet each other in compassion and support and co-healing as we all move through the layers and heal through the layers of all that we've experienced. And it was just my good fortune at the time I was writing my book that Dr. Karen Foley from Purdue University put forth her middle range theory of neuropsychological trauma, which my work is grounded in. So I'm just ever so grateful. And for those of you who are theory geeks like I am, it's my life, I love it. Please do take a look at her middle range theory, and you'll see how many applications there are for every nurse in every setting, anywhere on the planet. So Dr. Foley really describes trauma as avoidable and unavoidable. On the left-hand side here, you'll see the individual traumas that affect us all. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the nurse-specific traumas that affect nurses in practice. So let's take a deeper dive. That's kind of the big picture from 40,000 feet cruising altitude. And here we're going to take a look at what I call the avoidable nurse-specific traumas, the never events. And those are the red check marks. These should not be happening, but are happening and are substantially contributing to why nurses are burning out, leaving the profession, or wishing that they had never joined the profession, at least among the vast number of people that I'm working with. So let's start with individual traumas on the left. And these would be, again, at any time this is uncomfortable for you, press pause and attend to self-nurturing and caring, because we've all been through so very much. And sometimes we just do need to pause and process and integrate what we're learning about. So starting at the top, say at 11 o'clock and working counterclockwise, acute traumas would be something that is results from a single incident, like a major car accident or a physical or sexual assault. A chronic trauma is a trauma that is prolonged and distressing over time. For example, um, people who are persistently in domestic abuse situations or living in a home that has water damage or mold would be an example of chronic trauma. Complex trauma are any of these traumas, including the nurse specific ones that result from the prolonged and repeated exposures over time. Many times, complex trauma is interpersonal in nature, and it can result in someone feeling very trapped. Developmental trauma would be just what you would expect, those attachment disruptions in early childhood, along with any ACEs or adverse childhood events that could impact the developing human. And then, of course, there could be all sorts of neglect, physical and emotional notwithstanding. Now, if we go up to 12 o'clock here, and let's go to just kind of walk through briefly the nurse specific traumas. And we'll start with the vicarious secondary trauma. And you'll see here, this one has kind of a sad face, because it's sad that we are exposed to it, but we know in these three categories that we're going to be, it's inherent with the role of nursing, that we are going to experience some vicarious or secondary trauma by virtue of caring for our patients and witnessing and facilitating their process as they move through their healing trajectory. So that's expected and inherent in the nursing role, and something that we just really need to be ever so attentive to. You also will see there that we have historical trauma. So in nursing, the nursing as an occupational class is one that has been highly oppressed, marginalized, and disenfranchised, historically speaking, largely by patriarchal, societal, and cultural forces. And so this is the legacy that the context in which we practice. And so being aware of it, and part of my work is helping us to self-empower and transcend that, but that takes all of us. But we are part of our historical tapestry. The next category is workplace violence, and this would include perhaps any physical or emotional violence that has been visited upon you by patients or clients, and also that which manifests in our colleagues through incivilities of all nature and lateral violence, bullying, etc. Then we have system-induced trauma. So workplace violence as a nurse-specific trauma, as system-induced trauma, as insufficient resource trauma, and second victim trauma when it's secondary to healthcare system inadequacies. For me, these are all never events. This is avoidable nurse-specific traumas that should not be visited on the nurse if we indeed are striving to deliver safe and high quality patient care. So that's why those have a check mark. So let's pick up our conversation at about 3 o'clock at the system induced trauma. And this is any sort of trauma that comes through the system. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the healthcare system. For example, if you've had to go to a court of law to testify in some sort of a nursing situation or healthcare situation, or if you had to respond to your state board, those would be examples of system-induced trauma, as would be the healthcare system itself through its practices, through its oppressive and marginalization of nurses, whether intentional, explicit, or implicit, it exists. And this is something that all of us need to continue to work on to be the change we need to see in really getting rid of the system-induced trauma. Right up there with insufficient resource trauma. And the vast majority of my traumatized nurses with whom I coach and facilitate their healing in my practice are being stretched beyond capacity. Too many patients, not enough resources, getting called in on our day off. Our phone is getting, just repeatedly activated by people contacting us when we're supposed to be resting and restoring. Maybe not enough supplies or the right team that you need. Maybe you have not the right expertise that is needed for the acuity of the patients. All of those sorts of things would be falling in the category of insufficient nurse trauma, and nurse patient ratios are usually at the very top of that list. And then there's second victim trauma, and this is when the nurse experiences psychological injury after an adverse event or a medication administration error. And so perhaps through your duties, despite your very, very best efforts. And oftentimes this is secondary to healthcare system inadequacies, such as insufficient resources, that if you've had a misstep, that can create a lot of guilt and shame, and it's a big, heavy burden to carry. And one that if we were safer in our practices, and better supported, that you wouldn't necessarily be experiencing that. So again, that's a never event where when I'm looking through the lens of nurse safety and professional well-being. And then there's trauma from disasters, which that's inherent with our nursing practice. And so we all got to walk through COVID in various different ways, a global pandemic. And there have been many disasters that have preceded that, and there will be many that follow. All right, so let me come down here and see if I can advance this. There we go. So that might have been a lot to process. So we're going to take just a moment here and do a quick body scan with compliments again to Bonnie Badenoch for her incredible work in this area. So go ahead and just get comfortable, seated if you prefer, and close or soften your eyes, whichever is most comfortable for you. Make sure that you feel safe in your environment and connect with how safe you are, how supported you are. And then let's start down at your beautiful feet. Feel your feet to the earth, to the floor beneath you. Feel the roots from feet, energetic roots from your feet going through the earth, Mother Earth Gaia, down to the star at the center of the earth, bringing back all the nurturing, safety, and support from the planet. Bring that back in through your feet and feel your feet. Feel your lower legs, your upper legs, your back, your buttocks, your hips, your belly, your torso, and your beautiful, beautiful healer's heart. Your healer's heart which brought you to the profession to begin with, that may have been injured or wounded through all that you've experienced. If it feels right and comfortable, go ahead and place one or both hands over your heart. And a deep breath in and exhale out. Any stress, worry, fear, or doubt. Another inhale in and out as you connect to the skies, the stars, the universe, and the heavens above. Feel how aligned and connected you are in every aspect of your being. And then when you're ready, do a little wiggle in your chair if that feels right, and open your eyes. So let's continue with our trauma foundations, and we'll take a quick look at how trauma affects the brain. Now, where trauma is concerned, the brain is a pattern recognition system. And we're going to talk about in the next slide neuroception, your threat detector, your repository, and how it triangulates all the data with all the data that is stored within you. We'll use Dan Siegel's model of the brain. And you'll see here that using the hand model, the spinal cord feeds into the brain stem. The thumb and areas that the thumb is connected to would represent your limbic region with all of the expected structures and their functions tucked in nicely underneath the prefrontal and frontal and cerebral cortex, where the limbic system is in direct communication, and those higher brain centers are always assessing and interpreting the information that it receives from the lower um, parts of the brain, including the limbic region. So that's in a nutshell. That's the brain, and then it's really helpful to differentiate what is the upstairs from the downstairs brain. So for our purposes, we're going to call the downstairs brain the limbic system, and the upstairs brain the prefrontal and cerebral cortices. Now, what happens is when we have unintegrated trauma, and it gets touched upon by something in our external or internal environment, is that the communication between the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain is broken. It's as though the upstairs brain goes offline, and then the driver's seat, you'll find the limbic system or the downstairs brain. And it's unmonitored by the cortices, and that can be really challenging for the person who's experiencing this sense of disconnectedness and those around them. Almost always, you can tell this is happening when reactions or responses are disproportionate or blown out, commensurate with the context of the situation. You can almost put your money on it every time that the upstairs brain has flipped its lid for a minute here, and that the limbic system's in the driver's seat. Now, it's super important to know that this is not a conscious choice. This is all happening in the downstairs brain. It's an adaptation to trauma. It's how your nervous system has adapted, and so you're not stuck. It feels like it. It really can feel like you're stuck. It can really feel like you're broken, but you're not. This is just an adaptation. And all that is needed is really for you to learn the language of your nervous system and how to navigate it so that you can move into a whole brain healed state. So, again, this is not anything that is wrong with you or me or anyone around you. It's a manifestation of what happened to them. Because just like you, they have seen and experienced so very much, very little of which we would even know about. So just holding that compassionate frame through which to view people when they're dysregulated in their nervous systems. So it's not only the upstairs and downstairs brain that's affected, it turns out that our left and right hemispheres are affected. And so, just as a quick refresher, the right hemisphere is really all the juicy stuff in life, the emotion, the intuition. It thinks in pictures, it deals with the whole, the big picture, and relationships. By contrast, the left hemisphere is all up in logic and reason. It thinks in words. It's very ordered, sequential, and it's non-emotional. And so, in a perfect world, both of these hemispheres would be collaborating effectively, the left and the right. The stimuli comes up through the neural circuits through the right hemisphere first, then over to the left for processing, and then back to the right, and back to the left, and back to the right. I think of it as kind of lacing one's shoes. If you put in a brand new pair of shoelaces, this is sort of what that hemispheric collaboration is intended to be. But an integrated trauma or current trauma can disrupt that hemispheric collaboration. And so what happens is we shift into the left because somewhere in the right circuit, there has been woundedness as a result of current or prior trauma. Perhaps it overwhelmed the circuits in there. It was too much. Perhaps you didn't have who you perceived that you needed before, during, and after the event, which is just so, so important. And so what happens is we shift over to the left. It's an adaptation, again, not a choice. And we can become very detached and disconnected internally and with others because that left hemispheric dominance. And there is evidence of left shiftedness throughout healthcare systems, organizations, and society at large. If you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend reading the work of Dr. Ian McGilchrist, and fascinating to see where we are with all of that. Okay, so our goal then is we want to be in a whole brain state, and for those of us who have been impacted by trauma, we might have some healing to do in our upstairs and downstairs brain connections, as well as balancing our hemispheres so they can collaborate effectively, and we can have really these beautiful coherent brainwave patterns throughout the brain. So that might have been a lot. So let's just take a moment to let that kind of marinate and integrate. And we're going to do a much faster round of Bonnie's body scan. And this is all in service to what we're doing at the end of the presentation. So these are kind of practice rounds. So again, just get comfortable, seated or otherwise. Close or soften your eyes. Big breath in. And exhale out any fear, worry, doubt, stress, etc. Feel your feet connect to the floor below, the earth below that. Feel the roots energetic from your feet down through the earth to the star at the center of the earth. Beautiful Mother Earth Gaia, bringing up back all that beautiful healing energy and nourishment back up through the bottom of your feet, which you are now going to feel your lower legs. Feel your upper legs, your hips, your buttocks, your back, your belly, your beautiful healer's heart. Place one or both hands over your heart. Big inhale in and exhale, sending anything that is stressful or disruptive in any way up to the stars, the sun, the skies, the heavens above. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes, and we'll continue on our journey. We'll look at how trauma affects your nervous system, which when I say nervous system, I'm really talking about autonomic nervous system, but that's just a whole mouthful to say. So just know that I say nervous system because it's easier for us all. So your nervous system, your ANS, evolved over 300 to 500 million years, and it responds to your threat detector, which I'll introduce to you in just a moment, which has one job, and that's to keep you safe. What happens though is unintegrated trauma gets stored in the body, in the bodily circuits, and it really gets where you can find it most commonly is in skin, the muscles, the joints, and any number of the neural circuits and plexes that are running through your body. As a result of this, your nervous system threat detector can kind of get stuck in this on position. It might crossfire or it might overfire, and that contributes to dysregulation. And so, what once was an adaptive response, maybe at the time of traumatization, is maladaptive in the context right now. For example, when your limbic system gets in the driver's seat. So let's take a deeper dive. I put this chart here. Please don't feel like you need to read everything. I'm going to walk you through everything, but I put it here because this is the one that most people are familiar with. And so if you've seen this before, I just want you to be able to mind map onto that we're talking really about the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, including the dorsal and ventral vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10. And these responses, remember, are not conscious choices happening below the level of consciousness. So what we want, our goal, and I've got, you'll see here yellow stars and then the white arrow. Our goal is to stay in the green and the lower part of the red in the I can circuit of your sympathetic nervous system. And see that little sine wave running right between the green and the red sections, or the lower and the middle sections? That is really where we want to be. That's the sweet spot of your nervous system, or your window of tolerance, which looks like this. We really want to make sure that um, we are doing everything we can to support ourselves in staying in ventral vagal tone and keeping our stress levels within the manageable sympathetic activation, the I can, so that you can thrive inside the window. Um, what closes that window and can cause you to feel like you've fallen completely out of it is if you get hyper aroused and you moved into that I can't sympathetic state, or if that dorsal vagal circuit comes online. And so passing current trauma can really thwart us being in the window of tolerance. And let's look at how that can happen. Essentially, we have three circuits in the autonomic nervous system and vagus nerve. There's the ventral vagal at the top, which is I am and we are safe. This is our social engagement circuit, where we can be fluid with others and communicate and emote with them. We feel calm, cool, collected, and connected. But if you get too much stimuli, or your threat detector signals that there is a potential threat or danger, then your sympathetic circuit is going to come online. That's going to put you in active protection mode, or what you've probably heard is fight or flight, right? So you might move towards the stimuli with anger or rage, or other sort of energetic actions, or you might move away from the stimuli, maybe with worry, anxiety, etc. Now, if you'll notice on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a ladder there and there's arrows. So this is all hierarchical. So if you're in ventral vagal, which is where ideally most of us would have that circuit online, you get some stimuli, and it's like, okay, well, the threat detector, you can manage that. You can either fight or flight. And if the stimuli is such that um, the active protection isn't going to work, then you're going to go down to the next level on the ladder, which is that dorsal vagal circuit will come online. And that's our no hands on deck. This is the passive protection system, where you're going to be partially or totally immobilized because you can't flee. You can't fight your way out of it. You can't flee your way out of it. So the best that can happen is that you can shut down, um, either partially or totally. And this feels like we are feeling numb or trapped when this happens. So you can't go from, if you're in a dorsal vagal online, you can't just hopscotch up the ladder to ventral vagal. We need to go through the sympathetic, and this isn't a choice. This is how your nervous system is hardwired, if you will. And so just know that if you're in dorsal vagal, that circuit's online, that you're going to be moving through the sympathetic circuit on your way to ventral vagal. Now, your threat detector this is a term that was coined by Dr. Stephen Porges in his polyvagal theory. And that's like the process that is responsible 24/7 neuroception, scanning your internal and external environments every moment of every waking day, in service to your safety. And it will take whatever cues it gets from the external or internal environment, and it will triangulate it with your repository of lived experiences, including, and importantly, any unintegrated trauma that you might embody anywhere in your body. And so this is all analyzed, it's triangulated before you can even blink your eye, and then the threat detector will signal which circuits need to come online to address the stress or the threat to your, or perceived threat to your survival. So your repository, for which each of us have our own very unique lived experiences, since we know that that is a factor, this really does explain how several nurses or people can be exposed to the same trauma and have very different responses and impact, because it depends on what's happening within their repository and how their nervous system has adapted over time to that. Now, as you know, nurses, nothing's ever as simple as one, two, three, right? So there's combinations. There's a kind of a mixology, if you will, to how these three circuits come online, and they can be mixed so that in ventral vagal you might have a little sympathetic circuit online where you can play, or you might have just a smidge of dorsal vagal online so you can be still. So, people who are in the play hybrid on the right are your hybrids. You might find it very difficult to do a stillness practice. You might need to go for a walk or go dance or do something, go for a hike because you have that sympathetic tone online. And similarly, people who have that stillness hybrid, they may not be able to ramp up and go for a run, but really they need to do like some yoga or some meditation. So, aligning with what your nervous system has going on is wonderful. And then also moving through it if you want to, if you seek to be in a different hybrid state. Now there's the fawning state, and this is where a lot of nurses are right now because really we don't feel safe, many of us, in our practices right now, largely due to insufficient resources and the other types of nurse trauma we talked about. And it's not safe for us to, fight. And this is determined by your threat detector. And flight, well, that's not really an option. You can't abandon your patients, right? So if fight or flight aren't available, then a hybrid might resume or emerge, which is fawning. And this is sort of, it's this, we don't feel safe, but our best chance of getting through the day or getting through the situation is to just please and appease whatever we need to do. And that would be fawning. And a good number of nurses also um, are in the freeze where they just feel hopeless, stuck, shut down, and are wishing they had never joined the practice or planning to leave the profession altogether. So again, with the circuits on the left and the hybrids on the right, you can see the arrows at the bottom of the ladder. Moving through those is a hierarchical process as well, not a conscious choice. So I find it helpful to think of all of these circuits. We have a safety circuit, which is our ventral vagal. We have a danger circuit, which is our sympathetic. And then we have extreme danger, which is dorsal ventral. And so, I'm sorry, dorsal vagal. So safety is ventral vagal, danger is sympathetic, and extreme danger is dorsal vagal. My apologies for misspeaking there. And if you look, you'll see that this is sort of everything runs kind of on a dimmer switch. It's not just like an on off. It's not a system of ones and zeros. It's a system of many degrees of gray. And so you can see in the upper right box in the stillness that, one person might have just a little bit of dorsal online and another person might have just a little bit more. And so think of the circuits and the hybrids as dimmer switches that are coming on, off and on, in response to the conditions that your threat detector has detected, including all that is stored in your repository. And so these can manifest as some behaviors. So if you're finding someone or yourself in a fawn state, you might be a people pleaser. You might be codependent in some of your relationships. You might feel like you have a lack of identity and it's hard for you to set or maintain boundaries. If you're in a fight response, sympathetic, fawning is all of the circuits actually, a little bit the hybrid. The fight is a sympathetic response, angry outbursts, controlling, bullying, explosive behaviors. A lot of people carry that in their jaw, clenched jaw, teeth grinding. That can all be sort of fight um, manifestations. Flight, also sympathetic. You're moving away from the stimuli. And this could look like someone who needs to be perfect, or they're always overworking. They're anxious and unsettled. They might be a chronic overthinker. And then there's the freeze response, and people who have this degree of dorsal vagal online, they want to be left alone. They're a little brain foggy. It's hard for them to make decisions. They're oftentimes will be late, they'll be lethargic. It'll appear as though they're putting in the minimal effort, but they're probably putting in their maximum effort. It's just because that dorsal vagal has them shut down. So understanding again through the lens, that compassionate lens of what happened to me or what happened to them, these are all nervous system adaptations. They are not conscious choices. And so we just want to just hold space for all that each of us has been through and what we have nurses have been through historically and right down to this present moment. It's a lot. And I just want to honor everything that has happened to you. And I am doing everything I can to support you in your healing process. So, we hear a lot about patient safety, and I want to also, which I teach a course actually, for my day job, I teach a course on healthcare quality, safety, and technology. And so, we spend a lot of time, and rightfully so, on patient safety. But I want to take a moment to look at nurse safety. Because as you can see, the threat detector, looking at what we've learned about, you're being exposed to several types of nurse-specific traumas, four of which are generally avoidable, right? And what do you think? How do you think your threat detector is perceiving that? Yes, I'm going to say that's going to be picked up by your threat detectors as a threat to your safety, your professional safety. And so, at work, we should really be able to be regulated so we can be in that ventral vagal circuit and provide therapeutic communication and care, really deeply connecting and being present with our patients. But oftentimes, that's not possible. And it's through no shortcoming of any one nurses. It's almost always due to the nurse's nervous system is being hijacked. So what do I mean by that? Let's go back to our window of tolerance. On the left-hand side, you hear what should happen is nurses should feel safe at work. They should be safe at work. We're not police officers. We're not firefighters. We are facilitating healing. So to do that effectively and give the best evidence-informed care, we need to feel safe so we can be in that ventral vagal circuit, can be online. And we have plenty of bandwidth to deal with all these stresses that come along with our roles, and we stay within that I can sympathetic activation circuit. And so what that looks like is for us being sufficiently staffed, adequately resourced. We have civility in our workplace and our cultures. Nurses are valued, seen, and heard. They're well compensated, and their professional wellness is prioritized. So that's what should be happening. But what often happens is that nurses aren't safe. Right? We get too much sympathetic hyperarousal. We move in from the I can to the I can't zone. And if that persists, then dorsal vagal comes in and we're hyperaroused, and our nervous system starts shutting us down, really to protect because the mitochondria are depleted. They cannot keep up with the energy demands. But that's a topic for another time. I'm just such a geek. So what happens is that when nurses aren't safe, the window gets smaller. And you'll see here that the people who are standing up, the nurses who are standing up, they're in sympathetic hyperarousal, and they might be um, a little aggressive or assertive. We have the woman on the right who is in sympathetic hyperarousal. She's moving away from the stimuli. And then we have the nurse who's laid out. She's in dorsal vagal. She's in the freeze. And it's really, really hard for her. She's not even in her window of tolerance. And so this is, kind of how important nurse safety is, because it really impacts how our nervous system is going to respond. So we have a problem. We have a huge problem. So let's look to our nation's experts and see. The WHO director, Dr. Please forgive me, I know I'm not going to say this right, Greb Herreras, please forgive me, who recently spoke at a conference with the IHI, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and says if it's not safe, it's not care. And I would have to agree with that. Then we have doctors Jarvis and Solani who say when nurses are not safe, the patients are not safe. Well, we can really see this through the lens of a nervous system. We've already got patients who are dysregulated in their nervous system. If they're in our care, their threat detector is signaling all sorts of things, and then we have nurses who do not feel safe, and so their nervous system, their threat detector is signaling all sorts of things. So we have this conundrum of um, trauma that's kind of reverberating in the foreground, but often not even detected there between both the patient and the nurse, and indeed most healthcare workers. So that really got me thinking. If the nurses aren't safe and the patients aren't safe, well, then it's not healthcare anymore. I think what we're doing is risk management. We're protecting the assets of the organization and its ability to do what it needs to do, and its shareholders and its stakeholders and its bottom line, and it's a lot of things, but it doesn't, from the lens of a dysregulated nervous system for healthcare workers, nurses, and their patients, it doesn't look or feel like healthcare, and that's something that really needs to be addressed. So here's some real talk from real nervous nurses who are saying, I wish I'd never gotten into nursing. I just can't do this anymore. Now, their dysregulations and perhaps yours are an adaptation. These aren't choices. This is a nervous system that simply cannot. So the paradigm shift where we find ourselves is the thought, well, maybe we need support navigating our nervous systems. And from that healed place, then we can start working on these system issues, because we're 33 to 50% of the healthcare workforce when you look at the international data. So we do have the ability to make tremendous change, but we need to work from our healedness and not our open wounds to do so. So first step is to attend to our nervous system, to take care of it, to nurture and nourish it, and not let a dysregulated nervous system drive really important life decisions. So the road ahead is for us to move from survival mode in practice, where we heal individually and together, because remember that co-healing, co-regulation is so important so that we can thrive in our practices. So that was probably, again, quite a bit to process. So let's take a moment, and this time I'm going to do super fast lightning round. So go ahead and get comfortable, close or soften your eyes, feel your feet, feel your roots go down to the center of the earth and back, bringing out nourishment and light and love. Feel your feet, your lower legs, your upper legs, your hips, your back, your buttocks, your belly. Hands over your beautiful healer's heart. And if you feel compelled, raise them up to the skies or heaven above. And connect deeply as you exhale, releasing any stress, fear, worry, or doubt, and bringing in all the light, love, and support that is available to you every moment of every day. And so it is. All right, let's move into how to navigate your nervous system. And just a refresher, we're taking the assumption, as does the AACN, that everyone, including nurses, has experienced some type of trauma. So exploring, oh, sorry. Well, I just messed up. Please forgive me. Apparently the hardest thing for me today is working my PowerPoint advancer. All right, so I just want to take a moment to honor and celebrate you for all that you do and all that you are. And we're just going to ever so gently just explore how you might have been affected or may be affected currently by trauma in your personal life. And again, if any of this feels at all uncomfortable or the tiniest bit overwhelming, just push pause, step away. I'm not going anywhere, and you can come back after you have some time to really process and do some self-nurturing activities. So we'll look at first how cognitively you might be affected immediately following a trauma. You might have difficulty concentrating, a racing mind. Space and time might be distorted. You might have memory challenges, ruminating thoughts, or strong identification with victims. Later, And later can be years. It can be decades. Remember, your repository holds stores everything. It's like the biggest data bank of your life, right? And so you might have intrusive memories or flashbacks, reactivations, self-blame. You might be preoccupied with what has happened. It might be hard for you to make decisions, or you might have magical thinking, or you might believe that whatever you're feeling or whatever you're remembering is dangerous. And all of these are adapted from SAMHSA's tip 57, and there are more. So I'm just putting forth just enough for us to explore. In your emotional aspect, immediately you might be feeling numb or detached or in denial. Maybe dorsal vagals come online. You might feel overwhelmed and helpless, out of control, disoriented. See, all of these are, you start thinking about them and, oh, wow, that sounds like it's sympathetic. Oh, that sounds like it's dorsal. Um, Anger, fear, guilt, anxiety, sadness, constricted feelings, depersonalization, all very, very natural reactions to trauma. Shortly, delayed reactions include irritability or hostility, emotional detachment, mood swings, instability, anxiety, depression, grief, shame, and fear of recurrence. All, again, perfectly natural, immediate, and delayed reactions to trauma, not choices, but adaptations from your nervous system. In the behavioral aspect of yourself, you immediately might feel startled, withdrawn, apathetic, avoidant. You might have a hard time expressing yourself, or be restless, even argumentative. You're going to have perhaps poor sleep and digestive quality or alterations, or you might find yourself increased use of substances and other risk-taking behaviors. You might, a little after or a long time after the trauma uh, exposure, avoid event reminders. You might have disturbances in your social relationships. You may have decreased activity levels, high risk behaviors, withdrawal, and again, increased use of substances, to name a few. All very natural, immediate, and delayed reactions to trauma. Okay, well, sorry about that. I thought I paused the sharing and instead of the video, so hopefully I can edit that out. All right, so let's look at the existential aspects of yourself. Immediately following a trauma, you might have a loss of efficacy, disruption of life assumptions, intense use of spiritual practice or prayer, despair about humanity, or you might even have a sense of restoring the faith and goodness of others. After the trauma, up to decades after, you might be questioning, why me? Maybe you've redefined life's meanings and assumptions. Maybe you're reworking your life assumptions to fit the trauma experience. You might be feeling hopeless or loss of purpose, renewed faith, or even reestablishing priorities. And lastly, in the physical dimension, um, you might immediately following the trauma have elevated vital signs, sweating, shivering, nausea, GI distress, feeling faint, extreme fatigue or exhaustion, a greater startle response, muscle tremors, shaking, or depersonalization. Delayed reactions would include somatization, appetite and GI changes, persistent fatigue, that's a big one, elevated cortisol, a big one, hyperarousal, lowered resistance to virus and bacteria, another big one, and a host of long-term sequelae in terms of your health. So, as you can see, given your repository of your lived experiences and everything that you've experienced, you've had a unique trauma journey. And that requires a unique healing roadmap. There's not a one size fits all here. And so that's why I developed your innate care plan, which you see in the pink arrow there. And we're going to talk about in the next slides. Because right now, the good number of nurses are in survival mode. And it's time for us to learn how to navigate our nervous systems individually and collectively so we can heal together and begin to thrive instead of just survive in practice and in life. So just put on the left-hand side here a reminder of all the trauma that you may have been exposed to over your lifetime, personally and professionally. And then just to introduce your innate care plan, which is how we position ourselves in right relationship for healing. It starts up there at the top left with life, including everything that we've experienced through the lens of trauma. And then it moves to the 3 A's, which is awareness, attending, and alignment. And we're focusing on the first two of those. And then from that inner work, then we move into the outer work of the balance. And that's what we typically think of self-care, all the externals. And then we move, all of this will lead us to a state of regulation in our nervous system, reconnection within and with others, and restoring our healer's heart that has just been decimated by all that we've experienced in our professional roles. So most people start their self-nurturing or their self-caring practices by looking at body mind wellness, connections, their environments, their financial wellness. Am I sleeping well and relaxing and recharging? Am I living my life according with my beliefs, values, and purposes? And this is all super, super important. But where we need to shore up that is we need to put underneath that our nervous system care. This is how we shore up the foundation with the 3 A's. Inner self-care starts with the nervous system and the practices of awareness, attending, and alignment. And today we're going to do the very first step of that, which is the microdoses matters. And we will continue to explore that. Once we have attended to our nervous system, doing our inner self-care, then we move to the outer self-care domain of all of the things that we just talked about on the prior slide. Also important, and these two work in concert with one another. We're whole people, whole systems. And so we start with the nervous system because that window of tolerance is everything. And then from that window of tolerance, everything in the balance domain in the middle of the pyramid gets better. And when those two are working in alignment, then we're at the 3 R's. That's where we want to be. We're regulated in our nervous system, reconnected within and with others, and our healer's heart is restored. And so this is just so important. Now, I work with people all the time who say, I'm doing all the self-care things. I'm like #I rolling because I don't want to hear self-care anymore. And I don't want to hear resilience anymore. I'm over it. And understandably so. It's, some nurses have had that, those important concepts to be weaponized. And I appreciate that. And so what I would say if you're challenged in that way is that perhaps you're not regulated in your nervous system. In fact, I would be willing to wager a large sum of money that that's the case. Because as you can see on the left, a regulated nervous system is the foundation upon which all of your self-nurturing and self-caring practices are built. And without it, it can just keep tumbling down like a faulty house of cards, as you see there on the right. And as it turns out, when we start with our nervous system, awareness, attending, and alignment in our microdoses matters practice, that translates in really stabilizing the Maslow's hierarchy, the pyramid there. We will feel physiologically safe. You've seen how the brain and nervous system needs safety to keep you in your window of tolerance, and then also really helps with our sense of belonging and love because we are social beings who have evolved to co-regulate and heal with others. So no matter how you look at self-nurturing and self-caring practices, starting with your nervous system and partnering with its wisdom just makes good sense. So let's take a look at this microdoses matter. This is going to be a quick practice that to launch your nurturing of your nervous system. And why should you do that? Why should you learn how to navigate it? So that you can partner with nearly 500 million years of wisdom. So much better to partner with it than fight against it. Trust me. That was a lesson hard learned by yours truly. But once you partner with the wisdom of your nervous system and you understand how to navigate that and translate that into your lived experiences, oh my goodness, you start thriving instead of surviving in practice and in life. And you get to live within that window of tolerance, and it's a beautiful way to live. And my wish is that for every human on the planet, really. So we need to think a little bit differently than our nurses. We're so concerned, and rightfully so, about, is it efficacious? Is it effective? Then your nervous system doesn't care about that so much, because remember, your repository is yours and yours alone. So really what we're learning is what works for your nervous system. What can you do? And what situations can you put yourself into that signal safety to your threat detector? So our goals are different than what might be, a typical nursing intervention, if you will. Our goals is for you to learn how to navigate your nervous system so you can be in your window of tolerance. And we do this by finding a safe space, even for 10 seconds at work. Even 10 seconds will do. Ground and center, and send signs of safety to your threat detector, and micro doses of self and nurturing to your nervous system so you can stabilize it, let it know it's safe, and continue to build the amount of time that you spend in your window of tolerance. So this is always a good time to ask what your biggest barrier to self-nurturing practices are at work, or even when you're away from work. And if you're like the thousands of people I've talked to, your answers are probably something like this. We just can't. There's no time. It's just too much. I can't even think about it. I'm too exhausted. There's no room for me in my life. There's just so many things, all the things. It's just not that important right now. And so I would suggest that, yes, this is absolutely true. And I would also invite you to explore if this is your sympathetic nervous system or your dorsal vagal nervous system. Any of your circuits or hybrids talking, because your nervous system will be yelling at you all of these things. There's no time, because it's in adaptation mode. It's responding according to how it's adapted over your lifetime. And so this is where we start bringing in this microdoses matters practice as a part of your innate care plan. So starting with, I always like to do a button jar check-in. What can I do now? Because many of us feel like self-care, many of us are eye rolling. It's an important concept, but it's been just kind of over and misused in pop culture and in the media and so forth. And so a lot of the nurses I work with are just over that term. So I prefer nurturing and nourishing. And what can I do now? Because most of us think, well, I don't have an hour, I don't have a half hour. I can't even take a restroom break at work. How do you expect me, Dr. Lorre, to do a microdose? Like, I just can't. And so I'm going to invite you to just look at this jar of buttons. Now, there might be some time that you can do a whole afternoon spa day. That might look like that big pink button there in the front. There might be times, the blue button, top back, where you can, maybe take an hour and go for a hike or dance or listen to music, or whatever is self-nurturing for you. At work, chances are, if you go to the smallest button over there to the left, the little cream colored one, you always have time for that one. That button right there is one conscious breath. Let's try it. You're breathing anyway, right? You have to breathe anyway. So just shift your perception and make it conscious. A deep inhale. And exhale all stress, fear, worry, doubt, anything else, angst, concern, right? It's just a percent. You have to breathe anyway. And when you do that deep breath, um, you can kind of stimulate that ventral vagal through the diaphragm. So it's a really good thing to do. So I would say that there's always time to nurture your nervous system because you're breathing anyway. Right? So just make one conscious breath. That's the smallest. I'm going to move to the next size button up from that. And let's just say you can carve out 30 seconds. All right. Because I think most people, your nervous system is going to tell you, your threat detector is going to tell you, oh, no, I cannot take 30 seconds. And I'm going to invite you to just um, go on a limb and say maybe you can. And that's what this microdoses matters. So this is a kit that I provide a lot of times to my clients, and everyday items. So for your practice, anything, I use a heart rose quartz, but any stone, pocket pal, artifact from nature, anything that matters to you that you can use as a grounding source. And I like to use scent a lot, and so lip balm. I provide essential oil, lemon verbena lip balm. So you can do a little bit of aromatherapy because our nervous system relies on scent a lot. One of our five senses. It's a quick way to send a signal of safety in. So whatever you might have, it could be something you could taste, it could be a soft cloth, any of your five senses. So you need something you can ground and center with, and something that connects to your five senses. And the steps in our practice are, and you can carry both all those items in your pocket at work, right? We're not talking you have to bring in, you know, anything huge to work, something that you can have on your person throughout your whole shift. So the first thing to do is find a private space, then ground and center, signal safety, and then honor and nurture your healer's hearts. Let's break that down. So a private space, I mean, think about, at home, those are easy to find. Well, I don't know. I had three kids under five. So sometimes the restroom, I had a potty practice when I was home raising my children. And so depending on where you are in your life, it might be harder than others to find a cozy or safe space, wherever that might be. I've also used my car. I had a specific tree in my backyard when my children were very little. It's like, Mommy's going to go look at a tree right now. And I just needed 30 seconds. And so whatever that looks like for you at home, and similarly at work, where it's just, you only need 30 seconds, so that, if you have time to run out to your car, great, but most people don't. If there's a quick stairwell, the bedroom, if no one's in there, etc. Any just 30-second place, dip in, safe space. Next thing is grounding and centering. So I always have a pocket pal with me, this rose quartz heart. And so I just kind of hold that in my palm. If you're at home, you can run, or at work. I just put out these are just some brainstorming ideas. It's your innate care plan, your repository. These are just some launching off ideas. Running some cool water over hands or face, squeezing pillows as tightly as you can. Or sometimes I hit pillows against my couch if I'm really energized in my sympathetic circuit and I need to discharge energy. Touching different objects, touching parts of your body that feel safe and comfortable, just to kind of connect somatically with your body. You can do a quick round of Bonnie's lightning scan, which we've been doing. Bonnie's body scan, the lightning round edition. You can do a 4-7-8 breathing, which is inhaling for 4, holding for 7, count to 7, and exhaling 8, and using the exhale if you can, depending on your space, because that will further stimulate that ventral vagus nerve gently through the diaphragm. And then any other ideas? All right. And the next thing is we want to signal safety. I like to use the five senses, especially at work. What can I see? What are 5 things I can see? The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What 5 things can I see? What 4 things can I touch? What 3 things can I hear? What 2 things can I smell? What 1 thing can I taste? And that may not be available to you at work in a 30-second microdose session. So do what makes sense. At home, there's all sorts of options. At work, a quick bear hug. Place one hand under the opposite armpit, and then place your other arm over that and just give yourself a big bear hug. If you're feeling really sympathetic, rubbing your palms together and then clapping your hands a few times and releasing that energy. Noticing and naming, again, kind of like that. I'm feeling this particular way. My nervous system is feels like it's doing this, and I, I am safe and I am well, and this is temporary. If you are a fan of emotional freedom tapping, that's something also that you can do. Many of us at work are in our sympathetic circuit, so just kind of doing a torso twisting from left to right, or kind of swaying back and forth in your body, maybe like kind of just like gentle dancing movements, or a little, gentle jumping or shaking just to discharge some of that. Oh my gosh, we've got the can hormones are on deck, the cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. And so you might need to discharge some of that. So be thinking about what that might look for you at home and at work. And then it's just so important to just honor yourself, because you know what? It is hard to be a human being. And it's even harder to be a nurse. And so really connecting with your heart, because you care so deeply and you have worked so hard to even get into nursing school, and then you work even harder to finish nursing school, and then you passed your licensure exam, and then you transitioned into practice. You've done a whole bunch of really, really hard things, all in service to facilitating healing in others. And so, just really connect with yourself and your heart, and nurture yourself as though you were a small child. And again, this just needs to be for a quick moment, 30 seconds. It's what we're shooting for here. Now, you're not going to be able to fully address everything at work that your healer's heart needs, but make a date. You know what? After work, I'm going to spend a few minutes in the car, and I'm just going to, put my hands over my heart and hear what my deepest truths are. And so that I know. And this is also a way of partnering with your nervous system, is to really just bring awareness to where you are and what you're feeling. All right. And then there's other ideas. So let's do a quick lightning round. All right. So we'll start the clock now. Here we are in a private space. If you aren't, walk into one, two, three, four, five, using your rose quartz crystal. Just go ahead and feel that, ground and connect, feet to earth to feet, legs, back, buttocks, hip, belly, heart, and hands up if you can to the sky to connect to the heaven above, stars, sky. Go ahead and open your whatever you have. I have the lip balm here, and just maybe apply your lip balm and take a couple of just deep breaths. Whatever you have that can signal safety. It might be tasting something. It might be a soft cloth that you brought from home. It might be just turning on your earbuds and just hearing a snippet of your favorite song, whatever that is. And hands over your healer's heart, for I honor you and all that you are, all that you've been through, and the amazing, amazing human that you are. So private space, ground and center, signal safety, healer's heart. And you can do it. I mean, really, I've done it in 10 seconds with people, but I'm presenting and explaining as we go along. But I think, or I hope that you got the gist of that, and you'll find that you can do that very quickly. And if you cannot, remember, one conscious breath counts, and you're breathing anyway. And that's compliments of Eckhart Tolle. I just want to give him attribution for that, because he's just been such an incredible mentor in my life. So here's my prescription for you, your innate care plan in your microdoses matters practices. Start with morning and evening doses, microdoses, just to kind of practice and explore and get used to it. And then I'd like you to continue to titrate up, before, during, and after work, in addition to morning and evening. And then really working up to hourly. I mean, I have some of my clients every 10 or 15 minutes, like it's just become a practice. Like they just, while they're walking down the hall, while they're, pulling a med, just taking a moment and doing a 10-second microdoses matter. And so microdoses to our nervous system matter immensely throughout the day. The more you can signal safety to your threat detector and your nervous system, the more it can be stabilized, and the easier it will be for you to be in that window of tolerance. And then when you're away from work, macrodose, like all the time, as much time as you have. So again, that's just kind of the take-home message of what you practice, and you can just refer to that um, on the video, or if you're attending with me live, there's a card that just you can take that to work with you. It's a pretty sturdy card. So let's check in and see where you are now. Comparing to where you were at the beginning of the presentation, how comfortable are you navigating your nervous system? And just kind of reflect on that and see, by practicing even more, you can probably go up another level or two, depending on where you find yourself. If you want more healing-centric strategies, not to worry, I got you. I have a YouTube channel going, and there's full length and short little, 3 to 10 minute nuggets for you there. We're in pre-production now with the videos, so please, be compassionate with me as I'm learning how to do all of this, and I've hired a team, and we're finding our way. And then you're welcome to use and share any of this content at work, at school, wherever and however I can be of service to you. Please know that I am. In the next year, we have some things coming for you, including my book on this topic, and a nonprofit organization called the Haelan Academy and Community, which will be our virtual container for nurses to come together and heal together from all corners of the globe. And of course, there'll be free resources and mini classes ongoing, and you can schedule with me on your website to do speaking engagements or come to your organization. However I can be of service. So if you would be so kind, I would be so grateful. There's a 1-question survey. Please let me know how this presentation, how you found it helpful, and maybe something that you needed that I didn't deliver for you. I'm always looking to improve myself and the offerings that I'm bringing to you. For those who want to geek out on the reference list, there you can take a look. And I just want to say, from my healer's heart to yours, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I see you. I feel you. I am with you. And I'm just so grateful. Until next time, namaste.